I just want to make sure you're going to be comfortable for an hour because it looks like you're sitting up.
Yes, I am sitting up. I am comfortable like this as long as my tripod cooperates.
Okay. Long as you're comfortable, that's the main thing. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good afternoon, America, and all of you who may be listening not only in America, but also in the world. It is October 25, 2021, and you are listening to the new WCEG Network. We welcome you. This program is Issues and Answers, and I am your host, Norman A. Carter Jr. Now, if you're on your computer or smartphone, you can view or hear us by typing in WCEG talkradio.com in your browser and then hit enter. And on the next screen, click the live stream tab. On your smart TV, it's so easy. Just click the YouTube icon and search for WCEG Network. You could even do that after this program finishes. You can do it at any time. WCEG stands for Worldwide Community Empowerment Group. Our programming goal is to leave you more informed and more empowered than you were before you tuned in. Our motto is, we speak life into the community. You may like us on Facebook and view us live. Follow us on Twitter and on Instagram at WCEG_talk_radio and at WCEG Network. Disclaimer. The topics and opinions on Issues and Answers are those of me, Norman A. Carter Jr., and my guests, and not the WCEG Network. Leave my boss alone. This is my show. These are my guests, and these are our words. We thank you again for joining us today. Our topic for today is the darkness behind the blue wall. Our edited Christian Bibles tells us that Miriam, the mother of Yeshua HaMashiach ben Elohim, was near the cross when her gifted son was brutally crucified. Our Bibles say nothing about her emotions. Yes, we know she was sad, but our Bibles fail to tell us that she was not only heartbroken, but she must have been angry and outraged as any mother who witnessed her child being murdered for doing nothing but healing people and making lives better. In September 1955, we had no internet, no Facebook. We barely had national news on TV, but we had Jet Magazine. September 15th, 1955, Jet Magazine printed a picture that will live in American infamy. Emmett Till, 14 years old, was brutally murdered in Mississippi for allegedly whistling at a white woman. His mother was heartbroken, angry, and defiant. At that time, the murder of Emmett Till was the latest in a long string of American lynchings of Black people. It was done with impunity. This had to end. Mamie Till Bradley wanted the world to see America's open secret. Look magazine was not there at the funeral. Life magazine was not there at the funeral. Time magazine was not there. Not one nationally recognized periodical covered the funeral, but Jet Magazine was there with a photographer. Mamie Till Bradley demanded, an open casket funeral that not only exposed the brutality her son suffered before his death, but also America's shame. Because of her courage and her defiance, anti-lynching laws were established. But in June of 1998, in Texas, a group of white men jumped out of a pickup truck. Keep in mind, a group of white men jumped out of a pickup truck and kidnapped James Byrd, a Black man. They tied him up and attached him to a chain in the rear of that pickup truck. They dragged him several miles behind the truck, causing his death. Keep that thought in mind. January 8th, 2021, Gaithersburg, Maryland. Plainclothes police officers were, quote, conducting a surveillance, end quote, on a man, quote, believed, end quote, to have a gun. After conducting a, quote, surveillance, end quote, this group of men in plain clothes approached Kwamena Okran, a 26-year-old Black male who was not causing any trouble, not committing a crime, just standing around just as many young men might be doing. America, there is history. Under the best of circumstances, young Black men being aggressively approached by a group of men, most of whom were likely white, would be startled and likely run. Running from a group of men is not a crime. It's a survival skill. Kwamena Okra was shot in the back and murdered on the streets of Gaithersburg, Maryland by a group of on-duty police officers who were not in uniform. According to the coroner's report, Kwamena Okra was shot 23 times. Most of those bullets were in the back or the side. There is so much more to this story, but our guest host can tell the story much better than I. But I'd just like to add that today, among our guest hosts, we have Miss Melody Cooper. She is the mother of Kwamena Okra. Justice Mary at the Cross, or Mamie Till Bradley, standing next to her son's casket. She is angry, outraged, and seeking justice. No mother should live to see a child die, especially a child killed for doing nothing by law enforcement. In addition to Ms. Cooper, we have retired homicide detective Keith Quick. Keith served for 24 years on the Philadelphia Police Department in addition to being a homicide detective. He served in several special units and patrol assignments during his career, including mounted police. He is a member of the Herbert E. Millen 151 Prince Hall Mason Lounge. He is a member of the Association for the Study of Classical African Civilization, a trustee of the Black Male Community Council of Philadelphia, and a global expansion leader. He is also a member of the Family Unsolved Murder Project. Retired Detective Quick appeared on an Issue and Answers program in February of this year on a program focused on the challenges of being African-American police officers and the need to recruit more African-Americans into a career in policing. Also with us is Ms. Cooper's attorney, Mr. Brian McDaniel. I welcome all of you to this program, and I hope it will educate the public and serve as a vehicle for change in police accountability. I'd like to begin my questioning with Ms. Cooper, and with the help of her attorney as possible. Ms. Cooper, I have great compassion for your circumstance and having to repeat your story and relive that pain of your son's death. I thank you for your courage, your tenacity, and the greatest quality of all, a mother's love. Can you please give our audience an idea of who was Kwamena Okra?
My son, Kwamena,
Kwamena, okay, sorry.
yes, was murdered at the age of 24. He would have been 25 August 31st. He was a delightful young man. He was very talented, well-loved. He traveled quite often. He traveled overseas, different states from a young person because his family was from Ghana. My son Kwamena was born a prince of their tribe. He was his great-grandfather's namesake, and his grandmother's father was the king of their tribe, and Kwamena was actually the namesake, and he was a prince. Kwamena was supposed to travel over to Ghana with the grandmother after he was murdered, but the grandmother passed away January 4th, and then Kwamena was murdered January 8th. He was very talented. He also has CDs, music that he made. He composed his own music, wrote his own lyrics at the age of 14. I have a couple of CDs with Kwamina's music, and then I have other music that he wrote 2 weeks prior to being murdered. And actually one of the songs is as if he was singing his own obituary. It actually told his story of right before he was murdered, in reference to how you cannot trust anyone, male, female, friends, girlfriend, boyfriend, police. And as a result of his death, those people were involved in his death, because Kwamena was actually in the apartment when the officers sent someone there to lure him out to go to the store, in which witnesses stated he never really got far out of the complex before these hooded men started chasing him. And they also stated once he got to the back of the complex, that's when the one got out of that car and then started shooting my son in the back. But my son was very vibrant, intelligent, helpful, loving, caring. He taught his niece how to swim at the age of 4. He played football. He played different positions. He played in different states, because we lived in Virginia, Maryland, and Delaware. And in each state, he was either number 7 or number 3. I know when we went to Delaware, the coach said, he said he wanted to be number 3. He said, you're going to have to earn your number. So on Kwamina's first practice, Kwamena was standing way out in the field, and I'm thinking to myself, like they were looking at him, well, what is he doing? He knew exactly what he was doing, because he was the best. He has trophies for being the best run stopper. And once that first initial practice was over, he told Kwamena, you can be whatever number you want to be. That team had not actually won a game in a year until Kwamena started playing with and for them. They became undefeated, and they traveled different states. And each game they played, since Kwamena had been part of their team, they won each game. Kwamena was a very good boxer. He did some boxing at the Ray Leonard gym in Palmer Park. He was well known and well loved.
Fantastic. Getting onto something a little bit more deep. When and how were you notified of your son's death?
His friend called me and said that someone says that they think that Kwamena may have been shot by police. And then my son called. He said that his girlfriend was on her way around there because she wasn't far. And they were actually on their way to that location to confirm it. And they actually called me about the same time to confirm that it was my son, in fact, on the ground for
That's
7.5 hours.
That's sad. And Detective Quick, you did some investigations of your own on this event. Would you give us some insight on that?
Yes, I did. And thank you for having me on the show. Several months, I think it was in May of 2020. I'm sorry, May of this year. I went to Gettysburg, Maryland at the behest of Mrs. Cooper. I went to the scene where the shooting actually had taken place. And I talked to several people that were in the area directly after the shooting. And the information that I received from those people did not match with what the police version that I had read in the newspaper. Kwamena was shot in the back, number one, several times. And in correction, he was shot a total of 8 times, not 23.
Okay.
But the police fired at him 23 times.
Okay.
The police version of the event does not match what my preliminary investigation revealed. Number one, in reading the final police version, where they refused to indict anyone in the case, the police said that a shot was fired at them. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I found out that that didn't occur because there was no shell casings found from the gun that allegedly Kwamena had. In addition to that, witnesses tell a different version. As I say, they say that the Kwamena ran past them. The police version comes out entirely different. The police version is entirely different from what actually happened, in my opinion. And of course, I wasn't there, but my investigation proves that the police version is a fabrication. The police version also has several inconsistencies as to what occurred that particular day and what they told the grand jury. So I would say, in my opinion, it's a total fabrication as to what actually occurred and what the police are saying happened.
Well, since you mentioned grand jury, I wanted to get to Attorney McDaniel just for a minute. I know he has to run, but my question is, there's an old saying about a district attorney can indict a ham sandwich. And we have here so many inconsistencies, and the function of a grand jury is not to assess whether someone is guilty or not. It's to assess whether a crime is committed, and we have reasonable suspicion to hold for trial certain people. Would that be correct? Or
yeah, so thank you for having us. Thank you for paying attention to this issue, and thank you for continuing to cover it to the benefit of Ms. Cooper and Kwamena's family. You are absolutely right. In terms of getting an indictment from a grand jury, it has proven historically not to be a difficult thing. And it really just depends upon how it is that the information is, in my opinion, submitted to a grand jury, and the type of information and questions that are elicited from an attorney who's responsible for the presentation to the grand jury. So most often, depending upon, quite frankly, how it is an attorney wants the outcome to be, in terms of whether or not an indictment is returned or not, that is not a difficult process. But we know as a result of the grand jury process that's been conducted in this case that none of the officers have been formally charged, and that there were statements that were made by the law enforcement officers in connection with their presentation to the grand jury that seem to be inconsistent with the physical evidence that we have received and that we've learned of. Mr. Quick referred to one of the things that is particularly of note, which is this idea that law enforcement officers thought that they needed to use this level of force because based upon their narrative, Kwamena allegedly shot a round at them. The firearm that was purportedly associated with Kwamena was a semi-automatic firearm. A semi-automatic firearm, if it is fired, will eject automatically a cartridge from which the bullet was fired. What they have acknowledged in this case, and as a result of their investigation, is that ballistics show that of the 23 shots that were fired by law enforcement, all of those shell casings were found. But oddly, the shell casing that was attributed to the shot that was purportedly fired by Kwamena was not recovered. Our question, the family's question, is how could that be? How is it that you would find 23 shell casings from all of the shots that were fired by law enforcement officers, but this one shell casing that they allege would have resulted from the firing of the gun that they attribute to Kwamena was not recovered? And so there's certainly questions that remain as a result of the the grand jury process that was conducted. We have received some of the information that was recovered from the grand jury. There is still yet more information that we're on the lookout for, and we certainly have additional questions about the investigation which was conducted. And it is likely the case that Ms. Cooper and I will be having an opportunity to meet with the authorities there to ask these hard questions about some of the inconsistencies that Mr. Quick referred to.
One of the things that jumps out at me, for those of you who don't know, I'm a retired police officer, is that the state attorney himself said that there was no evidence that the gun found at the scene had been fired. That's what he said. But it looks like you had Barney Fife and Andy of Mayberry investigating this because the investigators failed to check for gunshot residue on Kwamena's hands. That's one of the first things you do. And many of the wounds, as you said earlier, they were hit him in the back and the side. So that's inconsistent with somebody turning around and firing a gun. It just boggles my mind that this information would be presented to a grand jury as it is here, and nothing, and the grand jury comes back with no indictment. And the only thing
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. Go right ahead.
No. So the one thing I was going to say before I have to jump off here is that this position that Ms. Cooper finds herself in, having lost a son and having these narratives that seem to be inconsistent and incongruent, really were a result of the policy that existed before Kwamena was shot. These plainclothes officers who were charged with locating firearms in this community were not required to wear body-worn cameras. The fact that these officers were not required to wear body-worn cameras means, in essence, at this point, we are required to rely in large part on the narrative of those individuals who witnessed the shooting. And these individuals at this point in time, in large part, are law enforcement officers. And so this is the reason why body-worn camera and the mandate for body-worn camera for all officers who are going to be patrolling our streets is so critical. Because Ms. Cooper should not be left to have these questions about what it is that led to her son's shooting and have to navigate all of these inconsistent statements and inconsistent evidence when it would be as simple as mandating that these officers who are patrolling the streets wear body-worn camera. Body-worn camera protects not only the individuals who are being policed, but it also protects police officers, right? Yes. Because there's no question about what it is that in large part happens at the time that an individual is met with this level of force. And I contend that if in fact law enforcement officers know that what's being done is being recorded, they are less likely to violate the constitutional rights of individuals, particularly Black and brown individuals who have historically been the recipients and are on the victim end of these types of incidents. And so it is our understanding that this and other units like this will from here on out be required to wear body-worn camera. And I attribute that progress to the many efforts of Ms. Cooper in connection with the shooting of her son.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I realize you have to leave, but stay with us as long as you can. Detective Quick, we've both been police officers. When was the last time you have heard of plainclothes police officers conducting a surveillance on someone they suspect of having a gun? That doesn't make sense.
Never. In my nearly 25 years in the Philadelphia police force, which is a police force that's very active and has lots of crime. And I have worked in plainclothes capacity. Never have I heard of such a situation. And in addition to that, Also, you have 4 police officers working in an area that's a multiracial area. And those 4 officers were all white. My question would also be why that was. Why was there not a Black officer on that team at that time in that neighborhood?
Correct.
Here's the question.
Yeah, and having worked plainclothes myself, Ms. Cooper and Attorney Bryant, I know that when we had suspected criminal activity that we observed and we were in plain clothes, we generally will call for a uniform officer to come to the scene before any action is taken.
Mm-hmm.
And I just don't understand the entire confrontation. And sadly, people such as I or Detective Quick are never interviewed by people in the system to bring some clarity to these type of actions that police continually engage in or say that are completely wrong and have to be against any type of established policy that they have.
And you know what? One more thing, Brother Carter, before we go too far, I would just like to add that so far this year, 111 Black people have been murdered at the hands of the police. Some people don't like to call it murder, so I'll just soften it just a little bit and say have been shot, killed, and became fatalities at the hands of the police. That's 111 families that have been affected. Last year, in 2020, 241 families, Black people were killed, shot by police around the country. That's an inordinate number in comparison to the population in America.
And I spoke to Ms. Cooper. There seemed to be, and I'm talking about crime scene, and Detective Quick, you would be probably have more expertise in this than I, but addressing this question to Ms. Cooper, there seemed to be an extended period of time where your son laid there on the ground after the incident happened. What can you enlighten our audience as to how either one of you about that circumstance where it seemed that he was on the ground for hours?
He was on the ground for 7.5 hours. And I know this because that Friday, I think the first conversation I had with Detective Hamill was around 9 o'clock. And I asked her, well, how long has he been there? And she says, since 6 o'clock, but it was actually 5:50. And then I called her back and around 11 o'clock, because I know if he was there for 3 hours, and usually I think it takes them 3 to 5 hours for a crime scene when it's only one. I'll call him an individual and they call him a victim. And when I spoke with her at 11 o'clock, I said to her, well, he's already been there 5 hours and I'm on my way. So, my first conversation with her, I said I was on my way and she wanted to know why. Mm-hmm. I said, why? Because didn't you say that y'all murdered my son? She says, well, you're not going to be able to see him. I said, well, I already, by the time I reached there, he shouldn't be there any longer. So I kind of hung up with her so that I wouldn't lose my composure with her, because some of the questions and things that and comments that she was making was very sensitive. And mm-hmm. when I spoke with her again at 11 o'clock, and I said, well, where's my son at now? Is he on his way to the hospital? She says, oh, yes, he's not going to be there by the time you get here. because I did tell her it would take me about 5 hours to get there. She wanted to know why you wasn't going to be able to see him. Then she says he's going to the hospital now at 11 o'clock. I was thinking, my son was saying he's still laying there. And I called back at 1 o'clock and she says that he was still there. And I said, well, I'm on my way. She wanted to know why I was coming, which direction was I coming, who was coming with me, where did I live? And my question to her was, excuse me? She says, where are you coming from? Which direction are you coming? Who's coming with you? How long is it going to take you to get? I said, I'm the one asking the questions, not answering them. And furthermore, why is my son still on the ground 7 hours later? So in my mind, they were setting a scene because I'm not a police officer or retired police officer. I've just been around different situations to know that if it's not more than one victim, it doesn't take 7 hours to investigate the crime scene, especially when it was police involved shooting. They knew what they were doing all along, setting a scene. That's why they were hanging sheets and covering areas so that way people could not see what they were doing, even after they had told all the would have been witnesses and should have been witnesses to go in the house, close the door, close the screen, close the window, close the curtains, close the blinds. And that came from one of the residents' mouth. He named everything that I just quoted him on. And it appears that they all have been frightened and scared, just as well as one of the reporters told me that they were being followed when they went to reinvestigate and re-question people, that they were fearful for their lives because of the crooked cops.
Well, Detective Quick, you had some crime scene experience. What is your opinion?
My opinion is it's inexcusable to have a body sit out in the open for that long. I've never heard of a body sitting out that long. And normally the body is removed after the medical examiner comes, makes his pronouncement, the body is removed. And then the crime scene investigation continues. But I have never heard of a body sitting out 7 hours.
And may I continue to say something? I was also informed that not only was Kwamena there for 7.5 hours, quoted by Detective Hamill, that they, in fact, brought some type of machine while my son laid there for 7.5 hours. And they said that they had 23 bullets. One of the witnesses said there was 23 flags. He called it flags. 20 markers out there, but they found a few more bullets that wasn't amongst the marked bullets. And then when I went there that Saturday, because the people that picked me up said, where do you want to go? I said, where my son's body laid there. I started taking videos and pictures, and there was an undercover officer in the parking lot to the right. I wanted to approach that officer, and at that time, I'm sorry, my phone has blanked out for a moment.
Okay.
I hope you can continue to hear me.
No, we can hear you.
Okay. She pulled out of the right side parking lot. Then she pulled into the left side parking lot because I was taking pictures and videos. And then I went to go approach her to the left side of the parking lot. That's when she backed out and left. Came back 10 minutes later with 3 additional undercover officers and a forensic specialist. And I actually still have my pictures of where I took pictures of bullets straight down in the grass. I've also took a video of the forensics person and the officers walking around looking for more bullets on the 9th, which was that Saturday after my son was murdered. So I don't know if they included those additional bullets in their count as far as what they recorded or not. And then they actually power washed the area while my child laid there. They tampered with evidence. Two of the officers left the scene of the crime. They committed several crimes in the process of committing the perfectly planned execution of my child, which was nothing short of a modern day lynching, since they decided to kick his lifeless body over and continue to shoot him a few more times in the groin area.
Wow. Wow. When you went back that second day, you said that you said that there were plainclothes officers. At any time, did any uniform officers come to that scene?
After I was taking pictures and knocking on doors, and then after the 3 undercover officers came, and they were still doing the investigation. So I had my son's sister and one of my children's girlfriend, and well, 2 of my children's girlfriends, to take pictures as well and videos as well. And when I started walking back and forth towards them, I guess someone noticed that I was his mother. And then here comes a officer with a uniform officer came, because one of those officers that was not supposed to be there, that was part of the street crime unit, he came after the 3 undercover officers were there. He came, but I think they told him to go and sit down, because when he went to approach them while they were investigating with the crime scene person that had the metal detector, they were talking to him, and then he would look at me, and then they would talk to him. He would look at me, and then I walked towards them because I wanted to listen. And he got back in his car. He said something sarcastic to me, and I responded to him in the same aspect. And that's when the uniform officer came after that.
Okay, so in your view, was that a intimidation factor?
Not with me.
No, but I mean, not that you
were
they intimidated.
Tried to.
Yes, that's what I mean.
They thought they were intimidating someone, but it wasn't me.
Has anyone from Chief Mark Soroka's office or him contacted you, had a conference with you?
Not at all. I had been the one, and along with the radio station WPFW, along with Silver Springs Justice Coalition, Katie, Nene of Harriet's Wildest Dreams. We have been Miss Marion Gray Hopkins, taking the initiative to reach out to those officials like Delegate Gabe, Delegate, there is a Delegate Leslie Lopez. She's one that did reach out to me. Senator Ben Cardin reached out to me after Miss Carlene Ponder of Silver Springs Justice Coalition arranged a Zoom meeting with us after my son was murdered. But there were several attempts to have a meeting with Roka, as well as is his name Hogan.
Mm-hmm.
They did not. Every time it was scheduled to meet with me, something would come up that we never were able to meet with each other or interact with each other. And I hadn't spoke with the prosecutor up until maybe June, because they seen that we had put up information on social media and stated we had more information than they did. And that's when my attorney decided to turn over information to them. At the same time, he stated to me, because I asked, what type of information can I obtain? He said, you wouldn't be able to obtain anything until after discovery. You would not be able to obtain anything because initially I was not able to identify my child. I was not able to receive any police report. when I questioned them about the autopsy report, I was informed that that would be available to me within 5 to 6 years. So
Years?
yes, I said, excuse me, you mean months? And the lady, I can say her name, but I'm not sure if I should. She's at the medical examiner's office. She says, yes, years. So they actually was, I don't know if you would call it blue wall, and I call it black wall in me, and lying to me directly about the fact that I would be able to receive all the information that they have once the investigation was over, once they went to the grand jury. Okay, now they have been to the grand jury, and it was ironic that I didn't know they went to the grand jury until the day that I posted a petition online to be signed to have those officers arrested on October 7th. I put that online in the afternoon of October 7th and got a phone call that evening, maybe 7:30, 7:45, through Mr. McDaniel, and the prosecutor wanted to speak with me because I had also sent an email directly to the Attorney General's office. Now I'm finding out that they already had a grand jury meeting. Now I'm finding out that the investigation was over in August. So they not only lied about how they slaughtered my child, they lied to me of how they continue to hide what they did to him and how they choose to do things still.
Okay. One thing I would get into, because we're running short on time, you led several protests in and around Gaithersburg. And I think that you also appeared before the legislature. Is that correct?
In February of 21, the House of Assembly.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. And as a result of your actions, there have been some changes made in policies for handling police shootings. Is that correct?
Correct.
Could you get into that a little bit for us?
Well, basically, again, as we know, that those officers, those unlawful officers, were not wearing body camera at the time of my son's massacre. And I stated to the House Speaker that all officers should wear body camera. If you're wearing a gun and you're interacting with residents, they should have body cameras, because it's been known that a lot of but plainclothes officers commit just as much crime as they call the criminals, because they're just as guilty of being criminals themselves when they're committing these crimes. And like my son, there is no telling how many people they have murdered and gotten away with it, because there is no camera to show exactly as to what happened. Had they had cameras on when my son was murdered, there wouldn't have been a need for a grand jury, because they would have been indicted immediately from the way they massacred my child. But by me going there, speaking of, well, the speaker asked me, if we change the law, would that make you happy? And I said, at this point, nothing's going to make me happy, but it may make your citizens safer. And then I was informed on in May 1st, they have now implemented that all plainclothes officers mandatory to wear body camera. And also they're working on a bill in my son's name, because I invoked Kwamina's law, but I received an email speaking with legislators and delegates in reference to what they will call it, Kwam's law. And his name is Kwamena, is short for his name, which it doesn't matter that they want to shorten his name to make it a law, as long as they pass the law. Correct.
And what has jumped out at me, that this really hasn't been picked up by the national media. And some of the things I've noticed, because I've gone over some of the what's available online, is that these demonstrations were peaceful. You had peaceful demonstrations, and you were able to take a negative, the worst negative a mother could ever have, and turn that into a positive, not so much for yourself, but for other people. And I think that that's commendable. And that is so much in keeping with what happened to Miss Mamie Till Bradley and her son, where she turned her outrage and her anger into something that didn't benefit her directly, but would benefit other people. And I think you need to be commended for that.
Thank you.
And at this moment, as far as the judicial process, and I don't know whether your attorney is capable of speaking right now, but are you continuing to pursue legal redress for what happened to your son?
Oh, most definitely. I did, in fact, tell that prosecutor on October 7th that they've murdered my son, and y'all will try to offer me 5 pennies, but can you sell me another one of him, or can you buy me another one of him? Because I'm going to continue to do what I'm doing. And yes, we have another protest scheduled to demand that those unlawful officers be fired, as well as prosecuted. They need to be jailed for what they did. And I'm not going to stop protesting in reference to my son's murder or anyone else's, because even though my son's case is not all the way closed just as yet, and once I do have a meeting with the prosecutor and the state's attorney, I'm going to let them know that they're 10 months late.
Okay.
Now they want to talk to me. It's 10 months late. I'm going to let them know that they are late with this meeting that should have had occurred. And also I'm going to let them know of other information and facts and details that should have been addressed to the grand jury to make it more of a fair decision, not everything swaying on the behalf of the police. And yes, I did write the Department of Justice. Yes, I did write the Attorney General's office, and I'm going to continue to write the Attorney General office, the Attorney General of Maryland, and the Attorney General of the United States. I'm going to continue to write letters, and I'm going to continue to post petitions. And I have a question for you.
Yes, ma'am.
Have you seen the petition, and did you sign it?
I have not seen the petition. I'm sorry, but if you will send me the link, I will read it and I will sign it. Thank you.
And please share it as well.
I will. We'll do that right here on WCEG. Detective Quick, on this investigation, and I've not just this case, but in other investigations of police shootings, the controversial shootings, where they take 8, 9, 10 months to do an investigation. That, number one, it seems to me like that's a betrayal of public confidence. But does that seem a bit long to you?
It does, but I would like to say and add before we end, the way the Montgomery County Police Department operates is odd to me. It's unorthodox, if you will. And I will add too, there have been 5 other police shootings, fatalities, from the Montgomery County Police since this time. On April 7th, a Pentagon officer, David Hall Dixon, fatally shot Dominic Williams, and James Lionel Johnson. In June, Sergeant Frank Pruitt of the Montgomery County Sheriff's Office also shot and killed Kevin Coslow. On July 16th, Montgomery County police officers shot and killed Ryan LaRue, 21, of Gaithersburg, Maryland.
Right. I was going to mention that.
And that particular shooting was very, very, very disturbing. I watched it online because it had body cam.
I saw that.
Yeah.
I saw that.
I found that very, very disturbing. And also Montgomery County Sergeant David Cohen shot and killed Finan Burhi late last year. So the Montgomery County Police, in my opinion, lack proper training and the oversight of the Montgomery County Police, in my professional opinion, seems to be quite lax.
Well, one of my questions, and I don't know whether either of you are able to answer this, I did a little check on the census for Gaithersburg, Maryland, and Black or African Americans comprise 14.6. I'm sorry, make that 16.6 of the population of that city. And I wonder how many of those, what is the representation of African Americans on the police department there? I think that's relevant. We found it relevant in Philadelphia many years ago. And it's relevant there. And when you have as many killings and such, what the population is something a little less than 70,000 people, and you have this many police shootings, that's an awful lot of police shootings. That's an awful lot of police shootings. And we really, we're crunched for time here. I'm going to get back to you in a minute. I just wanted to state a few things, food for thought in reference to this. And again, I thank you both for being here. But in closing, and I will get back to you for your final comments, but I wanted to say the following. Christopher Sowell, 32 years, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, October 16th, allegedly stabbed 3 people, including his 8-year-old child. When confronted by police officers over a mile away from the crime scene, he was unarmed. Yet police officers fired 109 rounds and struck him 92 times. No indictment, no finding of police abuse of authority. Elijah McClain, 23 years, Aurora, Colorado, August 19th, not guilty of any crime, but slain by police. The police officers involved even returned to the scene the next day and joked about the event and took selfies reenacting the event. Breonna Taylor, 26 years, Louisville, Kentucky, March 2020, not guilty of any crime. Her apartment forcibly entered after midnight with a search warrant for a different person. She was shot and killed by police. At the grand jury hearing, and this is relevant to this case, the district attorney withheld evidence about the actions of the police officers involved in the murder. Based on his obfuscation, the grand jury found that the police officers involved were not guilty of a crime. George Floyd, 46 years, Minneapolis, Minnesota, May 2020, murdered by police for allegedly attempting to use counterfeit money, not a felony. He did not resist arrest. He was strangled to death. To date, 1 officer convicted. Jacob Blake, 29 years, Kenosha, Wisconsin, March 2021, shot several times by a police officer while walking away from a domestic disturbance that had been resolved. He was unarmed. The incident was caught on camera. He is paralyzed. No indictment of the officer, no finding of excessive force. Kwamena Okra, 24 years, Gaithersburg, Maryland, January 2021, shot 8 times while running away from police officers. He had not committed a crime. Police officers found not guilty of excessive force or murder, or not indicted. That's better. They weren't found not guilty. And because they didn't handle that one correctly, we have Ryan LaRoe, 21 years, Gaithersburg, Maryland, July 2021, shot, I had 24 times, It might be less, it might be more. While sitting in his car. All of the aforementioned people were slain by police officers, with the exception of Elijah McClain and George Floyd, all were shot. Here are a few things kept away from the public, and I want you to listen to this. Most police departments have police officers armed with 9mm or 40 caliber semi-automatic pistols. One shot from either of these weapons is enough to severely disable anyone, no matter what part of the body that bullet strikes. None of the investigations of any of the incidents, including Christopher Soule or Kwamena Okra or Ryan LaRoe, indicate that a ballistics expert had any input in the investigation. Think about that. Think about that, people. Christopher Soule was shot 92 times. Kwamina Okra 8 times. Ryan LaRoe, it says 24 times. When is enough enough? Every time you are hit by one of these high velocity bullets, your body will move. So don't tell me you shot them until they stop moving. This is some nonsense promoted. There is some nonsense promoted by police apologists about contagious fire. You'll hear about that. In short, it means that when multiple police officers appear on the scene and one officer begins to fire his weapon, others begin firing their weapons, even though there's no threat. The investigation into the shooting of Kwamena Okra is full of inaccuracies and purposeful blundering. Crime scene investigators don't forget to check for gunshot residue on the hands of the shooter, especially in an alleged police shooting. There was no evidence the gun found at the scene near Mr. Ocran had been fired. He's Mr. Ocran, okay? This is an obvious challenge to the credibility of every police officer involved in that incident. Mm-hmm. Grand juries, I said this before, are not empowered to determine the guilt or innocence of a person. Their purpose is to establish that a crime was committed and determine if there is sufficient cause to accuse the offending party and recommend that they stand trial to prove or disapprove accusations. District attorneys can manipulate grand juries by withholding evidence or planting suggestions in the mind of the jurors. Mm-hmm. We cannot continue to allow public lynchings by police officers and the resultant cover-ups facilitated by unscrupulous district attorneys who are elected by the people. We cannot allow the deaths of African-American men and women by poorly trained or racist police to continue. Miss Melody Cooper's voice needs to be heard, not only in the legislative chambers of Maryland, but also before the Senate and Congress of these United States of America. The war on crime cannot mean war on African Americans. We deserve the same rights and presumptions of innocence as any American citizen. Being murdered for suspicion of a crime isn't justice, it's murder, and the offenders must be prosecuted. And just as in the case of Ahmaud Arbery of Georgia, when the offenders are district attorneys, they also must be prosecuted. Wake up, America. Wake up, legislators. Hear the wailings of Black mothers and Black fathers grieving the loss of their children by vigilantes in blue. They deserve your time, your compassion, and your dedication to end this wrath of racist mayhem that is strangling Lady Justice. Ms. Cooper, Detective Quick, Attorney McDaniel, we thank you so very much for enlightening America and enlightening the world about the horrible circumstances that are faced by many young Black women and women at the hands of bad cops. Can't say it any other way. You're just right. Bad cops.
I want to say thank you for letting me be on your show and to keep my son's case out there in the media. And as my son would say, it's time to cut the grass.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We thank you so much. And we thank you for joining our program. Our listening audience, we would like you not only to view this program, but to share it with your friends and neighbors. Ms. Cooper really, and Detective Quick and Attorney McDaniel really put out some information that is evidence of systemic vigilantism by certain police officers in certain police departments. And we thank you, everybody. We thank you. And we're signing off. Take care. We'll see you again soon.
Thank you.
you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.